a lot of us, when we feel shame, we feel guilt, we feel embarrassment, we go inward and we get depressed, or we have self-doubt, or we have confusion, or we, have self-hate even. A narcissist won't feel those things because they'll go outward with all of the hate and the shame and the guilt and the dislike and the disdain. And that's why they put it on the people around them. That's why it's so abusive. By their personality trait, by definition, is abusive, because it's how they treat other people, because they don't process their own emotions. They were never taught to. And so they can't be there for you and your emotions. And so it's very invalidating being with them. Hi, hello. Okay, I'm gonna call this Midnight Ministries because it's late at night. I already washed my face, I put my creams on, I was about to go to bed, and then I realized I forgot to answer my question of the day. We covered narcissism this week in my Eyes to See class, where we heal from hurts, traumas, and toxic relationships. And I asked my ladies to please start giving me questions every week that they want answers to. And I'm gonna make one video per question. And tonight's question is, what makes a person a narcissist? Meaning, what do they deal with that makes them that way? And this person is asking this because I explained in class that narcissists are not born. Narcissists are made. They are developed. And I just also want to refresh that narcissism is a scale. There's narcissistic personality disorder at one extreme end, and at the other end, there's just, a basic 1 or 2 narcissistic personality traits. And a lot of people fall in the middle, and a lot of people fall towards the extreme that are never diagnosed. And while this is a very hot button word, and there's a lot of research being done in narcissism, it's a little bit more limited research than most psychological traits and conditions, because narcissists aren't running to the counselors and the psychologists and saying, study me, diagnose me, please. And there's no cure for narcissism. And they don't feel like they have a problem because they're not the ones suffering. Everybody around them is the one suffering. So while we know quite a bit about narcissists, it's still developing research, and it's very interesting and fascinating research for the reasons I'm about to explain to you. So it's known that narcissistic personality style is a manifestation of what happens to a personality after adverse childhood experiences. And it can be a manifestation of PTSD, which is very interesting. So that can come from neglect, it can come from abuse, it can come from inconsistency from the parent. So like the narcissist, that trait in them where they're just unable to attach, it develops in childhood. And that lack of empathy develops in childhood. It didn't just happen when they grew up one day. And even the paranoia that everyone's kind of out to get them also is developing in childhood. And so that results in an avoidant attachment style. And what's really interesting about this is that it doesn't happen to everyone that has adverse childhood experiences. Plenty of us had adverse childhood experiences or have PTSD or have CPTSD, and we're not narcissists. So why does it happen to some and not others? We even see it happening in the same household with multiple siblings. One sibling may be a narcissist and the other ones are not. So it's really interesting. It's like this perfect storm that develops that has to happen to create this narcissistic personality type. So it just manifests in this way, usually due to some sort of cognitive dissonance and a lack of empathy in the person. And some people have a temperament that affects this. Like from infancy, some babies are born and they're just difficult babies. They're just a little more difficult to soothe. And when they become older children and adolescents, they may be more attention seeking. They're more easily agitated. And that's their temperament. That's their natural temperament. But because of that, people get more frustrated with them, including their parents and including their teachers. And so that kid grows up and has a really invalidating experience with the world around them and with their peers and with those that are supposed to love them and teach them things like emotional support. And so the temperament combined with childhood experiences like the neglect or the abuse, plus being a difficult child naturally, that causes a manifestation a lot of times of narcissistic personality traits or narcissistic personality disorder. And the more difficult that the kid may have been, the more disengaged the parents become. And that's because they don't know how to handle it. They don't know how to handle the kid. And so that raises the vulnerability for development of a narcissistic personality style in the kid, because the parents are pulling away instead of teaching them any kind of love, attachment that's healthy, or emotional support and emotional regulation. So that's really one way that a narcissist can be developed. And on the flip side of that, narcissism can be caused by overindulgence of a child. And most psychologists in this research field have found that narcissistic personality types develop either by overindulging or underindulging. Like either end of the spectrum can cause narcissistic personality. But talking about the overindulgence, that's the spoiled, the always given their way, not held accountable and only given like material love or really overly meeting their material needs, but without being taught how to process their emotional needs or have their emotions nurtured at all. So that's, the parents that bought them all the things, but were never there for them in the time of need. And so this child never learned self-regulation in childhood. So they can't handle the emotions that come inside of them. They don't know what to do with that. So it manifests as narcissism in a way, and in the way that this shows up as an adult is it projects. And a lot of us, when we feel shame, we feel guilt, we feel embarrassment, we go inward and we get depressed, or we have self-doubt, or we have confusion, or we, have self-hate even. A narcissist won't feel those things because they'll go outward with all of the hate and the shame and the guilt and the dislike and the disdain. And that's why they put it on the people around them. That's why it's so abusive. By their personality trait, by definition, is abusive, because it's how they treat other people, because they don't process their own emotions. They were never taught to. And so they can't be there for you and your emotions. And so it's very invalidating being with them because they can't handle it. They don't want to hear it. You're a burden if you have a problem. You're overly sensitive. You can't take a joke. All of the things that the narcissists say to us, it's because inside they actually can't process these things. They are truly afraid of it. They don't have the skills. They don't have the tools. It's like they are frozen in time in that childhood where a parent should have met them there and helped them develop this emotional support and emotional regulation. And because they never developed that, they cannot do it for you too, because they can't do it for themselves. So that's what makes it such a damaging thing to be in a relationship with. And then, of course, there's the narcissist that had narcissistic parents, or a narcissistic parent even, where the parent was entitled, or there was narcissistic rage or arrogance or superficiality or other, demonstrations of deregulation in the household. And those lack of emotions and lack of emotional regulation was modeled for them. So the kid's just doing what was taught, what they saw, like we all do. We all reflect our parents in some way. And so these kids they're just doing what they were modeled, and they grow up and become just like their parents. And, another thing about that is that the parents a lot of times inject their emotional state or needs onto the child when they're developing. So even when the kid is sad or in need or wants emotional support, the parent makes it about them. And so that child is just completely neglected in that sense and avoids sharing their emotions from there on out because they know that nobody's going to be there to support them. And so then they don't know how to form or define their own emotions. And so they can't, do that in relation to others. And so as they grow up, they have no understanding of how their inner world works. And therefore, they have no understanding of how they impact others. And that's where the not caring comes in too. Because of this lack of empathy that's also combined with all of this, they don't care. They truly don't care. And that's why they don't think they need to change. And then narcissism is also, it's a byproduct, really and truly, of getting conditional love. The children that were only validated when they performed or when they won things, or the kids whose parents were living vicariously through them. And so their support of the child is really conditional. It's only going to be given if the child accomplishes what the parent wants or participates in this sport that the parent wished that they had done, and maybe only if they win at that game that's in that sport. And so they don't develop their own sense of self at all, and they find love only if they perform and do well in the things that the parent wants and finds interest in. And that also can develop a narcissistic personality type. And then there's also the parents who overshield their children. So the ones that keep them safe from all disappointments in the world. I mean, we're talking about the ones who take on all the hard things for the kid, and in like a helicopter way, not in a healthy or good caring parent way, but they are just taking it all on so that the kid never has to process disappointments or experience how to process those types of emotions. So that parent that really that bribes the coach, or, that goes and talks to the principal for the kid and, stands up for the kid in an overly protective manner. And that also can manifest a serious problem where there's an entitlement sense of self for the child and a lack of self-regulation of negative emotions. It never develops fully because they're never experiencing the negative emotions. They're protected from them. They're guarded from them. So just overprotecting them from reality and disappointment causes them to become really dysregulated as adults. And that makes them much more stress reactive, which is, both of those things are patterns in narcissism. They're narcissistic traits. Being dysregulated, not being able to self-regulate emotions, and then being stress reactive. And we see that in narcissism. We know that. If you've ever been with one or have one in your family, you know that they cannot handle upset. They cannot handle disappointment. They cannot handle feeling like anybody's against them in any way. And even the little bit of feedback that's not the feedback they want, or a little bit of criticism that you think is constructive criticism, they lash at you because they can't handle it. That's where this narcissism was developed, in this type of parent style. And then there's the child that maybe if they were the overachiever, and from a young age where their parents push them forth and only value them for the external characteristics, like pageant kids, or you got to be the football star. You can't just be on the team. You got to be the football star. The golden children pretty much is what this is. They want all the trophies. They want all the titles. They push them for a certain career or educational path. And in a way they express that I'm only going to be proud of you when you do these things, or when you accomplish these things, or when you become this, then I'll be proud of you, if they ever say it at all. And that teaches the kid that their value is, it's just only what they accomplish, not in who they are or their personality at all, which pretty much doesn't get developed because it's the parent developing it. And that neglects, yet again, emotional regulation. And so that forms also an entitlement mindset. So, I might have described some experience that was your experience, and you might be thinking, oh my gosh, am I a narcissist? That was my mom. That was my dad. That was my childhood. No. So that's the interesting part of this. That really is, because plenty of times these experiences are had, but they don't result in narcissistic personality types. It really is a case-by-case situation and a perfect storm situation. A combination of the many factors that I mentioned create the perfect storm inside of the person. And it's a deep, complex root situation. So some people may have had the exact same childhood experience, literally the exact same parents, multiple siblings, exact same parents. And one or multiples of those siblings turn into the most empathetic, caring, people-pleasing, no boundary having people, and have PTSD usually. And then someone else, the other child in that same family, is the full-blown narcissist when they grow up. So it's really fascinating in this way, because while we know from research that it all comes from adverse childhood experiences, the trauma, the issues of attachment, parents inserting their emotional world onto the kid, parents with poor boundaries, parents who are not present, and parents who are invalidating, we know that all of that contributes to the narcissistic personality type. But like I said, that can also happen to others and them not become narcissistic. So these are the patterns we see, though. So these are the things that we have found that do typically develop that personality type and lead to narcissistic personality disorder. And so don't sit here and try and diagnose yourself. Don't try and diagnose others. Just know this information. I'm just answering the question of how narcissists are made, because you might have thought that people are just born that way, but they are not. And so you can also hopefully guard yourself as a parent and try your best not to develop a narcissist by avoiding these types of things and helping your child to emotionally regulate. That's how to do it. That's how to prevent it. If you worry that your child's showing these kinds of tendencies, help them get in touch with their emotions. Let them know emotions are safe. Let them know emotions are okay. They are not bad. They're good. Even the negative emotions, they're allowed to feel them. They're allowed to process them. Become emotionally intelligent yourself so that you can help your child develop emotionally well, so that they don't get emotionally stunted and they don't get frozen in time, which is what narcissists are. And, I hope this helped you. I hope it answered your question. And I was going to tell you have a good day, but it's nighttime. So I'm going to tell you have sweet dreams. And I love you. Good night.